Good morning. Today we are headed to Atlanta, Georgia to pick up Amtrak's Crescent train to Washington, D.C. But we're starting in the Twin Cities here, so we need to hop across the country to be able to do that. So in this trip report, we are taking Frontier Airlines, America's favorite hated airline, mostly because of all of their extra fees and their very small baggage allowance. More on that later. Today we'll be starting off our trip by taking Plymouth Metrolink Click Ride to the Ridgedale Mall in Minnetonka, and then catch a Metro Transit bus to the Metro Blue Line downtown Minneapolis to the airport. And because this is the Twin Cities and public transit, it will only take over 2 hours to do what we could do by car in 30 minutes. Usually I have my black and red backpack, or like last trip I took a duffel bag and we saw how that turned out. So this time we are taking this very small backpack, which, believe it or not, fits 2 days worth of clothes, plus snacks, headphones, toiletries, all of that. How does that work? I don't know, but it does. And it's just small enough to fit Frontier's personal item status. It's actually a formula cooling bag. It's like a giant lunch box, basically, but it's just right for what we need it for. I remember when we got it last year when my youngest daughter was born, they brought it into the hospital room, and the first thing I said to the nurse that brought it in was, "Wow, that'll be the perfect size for a flight on Frontier Airlines." And they all looked at me like, "Do you know what's going on here today?" Look, here we are today. We're going to take Frontier. Taking transit from my main layover point in Plymouth to the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport is typically the most time-consuming method of transport other than walking, but on this last day of May it's comparable to driving, being that highway construction is in full effect on multiple routes across the cities. Past unutilized park and ride garages, the Click and Ride microtransit delivers me to Ridgedale Mall without a transfer to my next Metro Transit bus, despite the $3 a person fare for this on-demand shuttle between suburbs. Hello Kitty Cafe pop-up is here. I could kill time by going to the Hello Kitty Cafe and getting lunch, but since the mall is open on this trip, I'm gonna go inside and check it out. Ridgedale is the upscale mall of the Twin Cities' western suburbs, but there's no upscale security presence here, just a space to wander and a public restroom to utilize. I like the dead mall genre of videos, and this is definitely not a dead mall. Although it does close down at about 6 p.m., so it's a lot different from the malls I remember growing up in the 90s with. But that's cheaper than the airport, trying to keep down the amount of bathroom usage I need to have. Got an empty water bottle this time, one that should hold up a little while, but I'm not going to fill it till we get to the airport. I am not using the bathroom more than I need to on this trip. Says a lot about your town when you still have a JCPenney open. I might be loitering, but I'm having a good time about it, and only briefly pausing here and there. The central atrium has selfie spots, as well as coffee house and international chocolate rivalries. Down the hall, I pause to briefly top off my batteries before proceeding outside to make my bus connection. The trip across town by Interstate 394 and various nearby streets comes with views of underutilized park and ride garages, deviations through frontage road neighborhoods, and perspectives from traffic in the crowded lane drops of an interstate that won an engineer's design award for its reversible center lanes decades ago, but now feels like just another congested artery into the center of a metro area that is rapidly outgrowing its infrastructure as populations rise. Cool fact, this is the building where all the dispatching for Canadian Pacific Railroad takes place. At least I think it is. We're going to be arriving at the airport with about maybe a half hour at most to spare before boarding begins for my flight. I thought that my a la carte seat selection wouldn't get me any higher level boarding zone, but it turns out I was wrong. We're in zone 2 for boarding. Pretty swanky for my standards. Frontier doesn't have any outlets in any of their seats, I'm told. It's Frontier, so we'll probably get nothing and like it. And there's the old Sioux Line building. Both these buildings are complements to the Great Northern Building over in St. Paul's downtown. The LRT corridor down 5th Street is seeing only half the typical LRVs today. It would appear that Green Line trains aren't running this weekend, as the Green Line to downtown St. Paul is operating bus replacement service due to, you guessed it, construction on the line. It smells like Chicago in here. But the relatively infrequent 14-minute headways are again today in our favor, as we hop aboard a southbound Blue Line LRT within 5 minutes of arriving at Ridgedale Mall station. This part of the trip is a classic Metro Transit corridor that isn't looking as shabby as it was on my previous trips, perhaps due to crews only having one open line to clean and patrol for ne'er-do-wells on this warm spring weekend. Frontier utilizes a gate in MSP Terminal 2, my typical point of departure in my transit-oriented tourism trips. Well, there's no line back here today, and it's a good sign so far. Typical Blue Line ride. Now let's see if we have any time to charge the phone after we get out of TSA. It also seemed to look like they were using the crosswind runway for takeoffs. Runway 4. That usually only happens when they have weather coming in, but it's perfectly clear skies today. Yet we had planes taking off over South Minneapolis. So I guess we'll see what we get to do. All right, not so bad. This is the way I like to be walking into the airport. Hey, not bad. It's true that takeoffs on runway 4 aren't unheard of, but they're certainly rarer than other runways here. Shall we check it out? Oh yeah. I knew it was the right bag. Let's go fill this up. So you don't get water on Frontier. Bring snacks. Try to get a good deal on them. I found a bunch of energy bars, protein, granola for less than $1 a piece. Yeah. It was about a 1-minute wait to get into TSA and then about 4 minutes in there. Saturday afternoon's not bad. Probably due to the lack of Sun Country flights, right? Today's departure is under sunny skies, obscured by a haze of heat and Canadian wildfires. They are using the crosswind runway. This could be an interesting takeoff if we get to use runway 4. Fare with Frontier gives you just a seat and no selection. It's 3-3, some of the thinnest, tightest pitched seats in the industry. I bought up into the first row where we get the middle seat blocked off like European business class. I did not get a carry-on or a checked bag included with that, but I do get zone 2 boarding. I've got snacks, I've got water, so it won't be a terrible flight. And it looks like we get to do this unique takeoff too, which I'm way more excited about than I really should be. I wonder if anyone else on the plane will even notice. The ire that folks have with Frontier comes from the fact that they just want more from their experience, but it's an ultra low cost carrier. You're getting a very low base fare and then you add on based on your needs. If you have all the needs in the world, it quickly gets up to Delta and American levels of cost. Me, I'm used to flying Sun Country, and all I get with that is a personal item. In that case, it's a backpack. But as you saw, I'm making this small one work today, even for a 2-day trip. Front seat was only a $50 add-on to an already low $40 base fare, and those base fares go up pretty quickly. I felt lucky to be able to get in on this to find that fare when I could, because Spirit had a similar fare, but if I wanted to get a more comfy seat with more leg room for a 3-hour flight to Atlanta, I would have had to pay into their upgrade for the front seat tier, which would have put it easily up to Delta levels of cost right away. It would still be nothing included with that, food or drink wise. So why would I do that? I'm just glad Frontier had a flight today. Recently had some trouble with their customer service. people that don't do their homework and read all the stipulations that come with these reduced fares, they don't have any phone number to call when there's some questions to be had. That only makes the situation worse, and it just makes you feel like Frontier doesn't care. I like being as carefree as possible, even when things get troublesome. I try to be self-sufficient, but, I could see why you'd be upset. Boarding time came with zonal confusion about which of the two lines belonged to various passengers. Some like me that boarded in the second group when overhead bin space began to be restricted had obviously small bags or none at all. Having checked theirs landside, or perhaps they were like a passenger ahead of me that proclaimed at check-in how she flies Frontier without any bag. And wow, good on her for the effort. Maybe today will go well enough that I might someday be like her on future flights, both with other airlines and the much maligned Frontier that I was now staring down and witnessing the upfront seating arrangement that would be mine for the next 2+ hours. I'll give it to Brazos, the Ridgeway's hawk, that the almost brand new Airbus A321neo he's representing on the tail of our aircraft is feeling mostly fresh, if not on the verge of needing its inaugural deep cleaning after 6 months of flying routes like our trip today, with flyers that are likely to have brought on plenty of carry-on crumbly snacks, as well as the traditional human being dirt that we all carry. The plane did smell fresh, and the seats were initially comfy, if not slightly watermarked from previous beverages on the tray tables. But hey, it's hard to find good help that will clean every tray table between ultra-low-cost flight legs, am I right? However clean this aircraft looks or doesn't show, a practically new Airbus is a thing of beauty, and the upcoming takeoff on Runway 4 is going to be the highlight of the flight for myself. Though the taxi out has some good plane spotting despite the relatively short distance from the ramp to the crosswind runway via only a couple of taxiways. Prior to the airport's expansion decades ago, Runway 4 and 22 were the shortest of 3 runways, but it was lengthened for the process of increasing capacity. Its use nonetheless reserved today for periods of weather that would interrupt the operation of the parallel runways 12 and 30 with crosswind conditions. Climb out of MSP on this day was smooth, no turbulence to speak of throughout most of the flight actually. I got overhead bin space due to having no seats in front of my row under which to store my bag. We leveled off about the time we crossed over the Mississippi River and over the driftless region of Wisconsin. It's the second time this month I've flown this airway toward the southeast, but today we'll continue on a more southerly trek over the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys prior to breaking through the clouds during the descent over the rolling hills and forests of the Atlanta metro area. Frontier will let you buy the typical airline snacks and drinks on board, but I was saving my appetite for Waffle House, so I broke out my snacks, which were more filling than expected, but not by much. Navigating through the forwardmost cabin window would put those calories to good use, cross-referencing my memories of Road Atlas images from these states we're overflying. The restroom was very clean, likely due to my being only the third passenger to use it, but it was also the best example of where wear and tear was lowest on this nearly new airplane. Size-wise, it's a bit larger than the forward lav found in Sun Country's Boeing 737-800s and other airlines. It was nice to see an ultra-low-cost airline doing right in the bathroom quality department. Beyond central Illinois and then over Evanston, Indiana, Nashville, Tennessee, the flight proceeded uneventfully. The flight crew made only one run through the cabin, and it sounded as if few passengers took them up on their sales pitch for bag, snack, and drink sustenance. Another factor influencing my decision not to buy on board was I've heard Frontier pushes a tip via credit card payment for services rendered, and you can only pay via credit card as usual. As I've always thought airlines have been paying their flight crews better than restaurant servers or bartenders would get, I was a bit confused. Is this the case with Frontier crew pay, that it's low enough to say they are tip supported? Leave a thought down in the comments if you have any idea whether or not this is the case. Also, another potential Frontierism, at one point before descent, the captain exited the cockpit for a bathroom break. When some vocal lady passengers up front exaggeratedly asked who was flying the plane, the pilot, apparently having a good time with his paying passengers, quipped that the other flight attendant was taking care of it. And while this seemed funny to me at the time, I actually did some anecdotal research later on and determined that with the beverage carts positioned as to block the way forward to the cockpit door while the pilot moved out and relocked the door, the act of a flight attendant in the cockpit during such a bathroom break is within policy for some airlines. Maybe not all of them, but if you didn't realize the formality of it, you might turn your attitude toward the side of either the joking or alarmed when it happens on your flight on Frontier. In any case, this flight with Frontier was as advertised. The seat never did feel straining, but with only 2 hours of G-forces in flight, maybe this wasn't an extreme application of what is certainly a meager seat offering. Though mine did include some inches of recline, how many I can't tell you, I would have needed to rescind them by this point in the flight, when our descent and arrival into Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport became imminent as we overflew the metro area once, west to east, prior to turning 180 degrees and making our way onto the Georgia glide slope. Bidding our adequate but not at all generous seat adieu, I made my way off the Airbus and into Atlanta's airport for the second time in my life. I've actually used BWI more often. What better way to celebrate such a low number of arrivals than to merge my love of jetliners and passenger trains with a time-wasting ride across the airport and back on Atlanta's Plane Train, the underground interterminal people mover with the impeccable rhyming name. Okay, that was fine. An A321 is great if you're in the front. In the back, it gets a little iffy. I spent about a half hour doing for fun what some travelers do by mistake.
Next up is for 8 gates. A as in Alpha. Welcome aboard the freight train. Please hold on. This train is departing. The next stop is Concourse A. A as in Atlanta. Please hold on. This train is stopping. Please collect your belongings and watch your step as released. The next stop is the B gate. The next stop is Concourse B. B as in burgers and beverages. The next stop is Concourse C. C as in coffee, which is available on all concourses.
Having made it all the way out to the furthest satellite concourse, I rode back to E gates and then proceeded to stretch my legs with the long walk back through the pedestrian tunnel to T concourse, where I had both initially arrived and would need to be to access landside, where ground transportation and the MARTA Metro Rail station to downtown Atlanta and my Waffle House dinner resided. Wasn't quite as fun as the first time. I liked the female voice that used to be on that. Yeah, that lady was appealing. That guy was goofy, and I should just stick to the normal alphabet. I mean, yeah, it's just a people mover, but it has a kind of branding to it. I just feel like when they try to get too self-referential, which, albeit it is their prerogative to do so, it's not as cool as when they just talk technical. The upside to flying Frontier and getting no free food: you arrive in Atlanta really hungry enough for Waffle House. Still have it. I think they still have it. This section depicting what I believe to be a Georgia swamp was better when a soundtrack of crickets and frogs was playing on my last visit, but perhaps I dreamed or embellished the entire initial experience. Okay, shall we go to ground transportation? Fine, MARTA, I believe we will, because waffles are in order. It's one word there. We walked the length of the airport. Now it's time to go find a MARTA train and go downtown, ride the streetcar over to have some Waffle House. Best part is how it didn't tell me to keep moving. Nice. MARTA stations, including the airport, have an uncanny resemblance to their cousin systems' architecture in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. This once futuristic train and its LRV counterpart, the Atlanta streetcar, will be featured in a future episode on the channel. Okay, I can see downtown Atlanta. Dinner is a ways that way, and the Amtrak train is a ways further. Oh, I've never been more in the mood for waffles than I am right now. Just give yourself a few hours dehydrated in the air. That'll take care of that. But definitely needs syrup and all that good stuff. Pecans. That's what we're getting. Thanks for flying to Atlanta with me today. We'll be back in Georgia as well as DC in the weeks to come. And for the sake of historical document, we'll also take a look at some new metro lines in Minnesota, back where we came from. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.